With only 40% of the population enjoying the country's unstable electricity supply, Nigeria is building a huge infrastructure rollout plan. Joining us now from our Cape Town studios to discuss investment opportunities in Nigeria's infrastructure is James Milner. He's the research analyst for the environmental and building technologies at Frost & Sullivan. James, thank you so much for joining us. Now, the stats coming out of Nigeria are quite interesting. It says here only 40% of the Nigerian population is estimated to have access to electricity, and those that are connected to the grid report rolling power outages, and that is very common, hampering business development, especially in small and medium-term enterprises. Against that background, how difficult is it to sell Nigeria as an investment destination for this massive infrastructure rollout plan? We know the need is big, but is there the capital and the capacity to actually roll out such an ambitious plan?
Well, obviously, the need for electricity in Nigeria is a massive, massive problem and a well-documented problem. Trying to work out exactly whether the problem is actually possible in terms of restructuring the entire network, revamping the network, building new energy, it's a difficult thing to put a figure on exactly, but at the moment, estimates would suggest that you're looking at Nigeria attempting to invest about $2 billion a year just in transmission generation infrastructure, and then you'd be looking at about $4 billion a year just in power generation infrastructure. And those are very conservative estimates. So my concern would be the fact that perhaps the funding for that sort of investment is not achievable.
Yeah. Now, of course, I mean, funding within an African context hugely challenging, particularly if one looks at the difficulty that businesses generally have in accessing capital markets. When one puts together proposals for private public partnerships, particularly around infrastructure, what are the kinds of things that are immediate challenges beyond just accessing finance? What about things like the stability of the regulatory environment and so on? What are the additional issues that one should be taken into account?
I think if you look at Africa historically, PPPs have not been taken on hugely, but it is a factor that's increasingly coming into play. If you look at Nigeria specifically, I can't think of any specific examples of success stories in terms of PPPs. But what I would like to highlight is the fact that the government, as you say, is making increasing strides in terms of improving the legislation, improving the capability. I know that the government's been working with the World Bank and working with the African Development Bank at improving capabilities in terms of enhancing the potential for implementing PPP initiatives. So looking forward, there's likely to be more potential for PPPs in Nigeria.
Now, of course, infrastructure is the big buzzword on the continent. We know that the SADC summit in Maputo recently also unveiled something like $550 billion in terms of infrastructure just in that particular region. Nigeria is a massive economy, huge growth spurts. What about infrastructure layouts is attractive as investment opportunities? I mean, you obviously need a very firm participation of the state, but what is attractive for companies looking at this as an investment opportunity?
Well, I think what's particularly attractive is the fact that if you look 10, 15 years ago, the political situation in Nigeria was poor. If you look currently, the situation has improved vastly, and what's actually happening is that there's a huge infrastructure drive being backed by the government at the moment, and I think that's critical in terms of giving the investors, foreign investors, the confidence to step in and say, okay, this is a good place to invest money. Obviously, you've got a huge market, 170 million people who will require infrastructure. And obviously, if Nigeria is keen on obtaining the goals that they've suggested, becoming one of the top 20 economies in the world by 2020, they've already highlighted the fact that infrastructure development is a national priority. So there's likely to be huge potential for investment in the sector over the next 10 years.